First of all, thank you so much for coming here and of course having to talk about such an important topic, because democracies after fire is something that we are not have to theorize about, but we are living after that. And it was a very, for me, not only interesting but timely when President Nausėda was talking about resilience in particular, but also he was mentioning a lot of things that Future of Ukraine program is doing, is how important and basically timely the hybrid threats are in Europe, marching all around us. He called it entourage, I call it voyage of the drones of other interstates into the national affairs of the countries. We also talk about subsea infrastructure or cable infrastructure in particular, but we also talk about shadow fleet operations, and European Commission just last week announced about special envoy on the shadow fleet operations, so we are expecting that to be something that taking the EU seriously. But I would love to give the floor to our first speaker, Vygaudas, if I may. In your career, and I really would love to quote Winston Churchill, not because I'm from University of Cambridge as of now, but because it's really matters. He was saying something about the price of greatness is responsibility. I would transform it to say the price of survival is the responsibility as of 2025. And therefore, given your extensive diplomatic experience, how do you view the current transformation of democracies under global pressure, I would say under global fire, where we have absolutely geopolitical shifts happening as we speak? And where the resilience stands in that? Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's great to be back at Vytautas University to see the former rector and new rector in ATHENA. Congratulations. I mean, coming to your question, I like to zoom out whenever a challenge or question arises. My advice to my collaborators and the students alike is try to make a pause, analyze, zoom out, and look beyond the horizon if possible. I mean, zooming out, I believe, is important to recognize those geopolitical changes or profound shift which is taking place. And it's not only in the East, not only in the Pacific, but it's also in the former Western world, so-called. And, you know, with Donald Trump, what I call a new sheriff in town in Washington, D.C., who is changing the rules of the game internally and externally, with President Putin persisting with his war against Ukraine, and President Xi, who is, asserting China's global economic and political power. I believe for us Europeans, it is a very strong reminder that European hour has arrived. From Lisbon to Vilnius and beyond. We have to get act together and try to, not only to be a preacher of the values and democracy which European Union likes to be for a long time, but also we need to leverage our political vision with economic leverage, with technological innovation, as well as with still insufficiently absent military might. Why do we need that? Because it's clear that with rewriting the rules of the game by the current and maybe the future White House, and what's happening in the Pacific and the East from us, it's evident that the rules-based system is being replaced by the new narrative, new approach to international politics, which is based on the national interests, which is based on the power, on influence, and on projecting that power beyond respective nations and the continents. European Union is still ill-equipped of doing that because of the absence of military might. And for that reason, it's not only because the war in Ukraine, but because if Europe wants to play a profound role and being taken seriously by our partners and adversaries, we have to invest in defense, we have to create an autonomous and capable military power, which is unfeasible without Germany becoming again a military might, a military hub of Europe, which would project that power beyond its territories for the rest of Europe. And here, Lithuanian-German partnership plays a particularly important role, with Germany's commitment to place a brigade in Lithuania, and with Lithuania hosting the German troops in Lithuania. We can project that confidence within Germany, where there is still part of society questioning that assertion of Germany going back to military might, but also providing a comfort for other neighbors of Germany in Europe. And I don't make any secret, maybe there are some people in this hall as well who still question, or at least when I speak with them, they come after conference on a tete-a-tete meeting and said, Vygaudas, do you really want to see Germany militarily again? I said, yes, because Germany is different from what it was 8 years ago. And Germany has proven its democratic credentials. So that's the second one. And the third one, inevitably, United States, whether we like Donald Trump or we dislike him, United States will remain an indispensable partner for Europe. There is no one else who can defend territorial integrity of NATO member states, or we cannot defend ourselves yet without United States. So here we will have to walk a very fine line, and sometimes our political leaders, including presidents who were here before us, will need to try to dance in a blend of music between a kind of village people, YMCA, and Beethoven, Ode to Joy.
All right, music diplomacy we're talking about, thank you. First, to comment, because Germany was mentioned, it definitely will be my pleasure to refer to Konstantin, right? So, our previous speaker, Secretary General, apologies, was telling us about transforming for Europe concept of 2035. And we talked about the mindset, what Vygaudas was telling us about, like, so it's that the mindset of Europe is not still at war. And I loved how the Vice Minister, that's why I quoted him, of Lithuania was putting into the concept of defensive mindset or defense mindset. What does it mean in terms of hybrid warfare that we are basically exploring with not only Voyages, but many more other, let's say, operations happening on this land and many, many other lands? And what does it take us as a lesson learned, not to be reactive, but rather proactive?
Thank you very much for the invitation, and it's really an honor to be here. And Victoria, since you mentioned Germany, I would like to say I'm not even a German, although my grandfather 10 generations ago was the military governor of Königsberg. But my German now is on the level of Wo ist der Bahnhof, and no more than
okay,
that.
we accept that.
To follow up on Vygaudas, what Vygaudas said after that I'll touch upon what you asked. I think it's, first of all, let's face it, if we're talking about Europe, there are definitely two Europes still. One is from Ghana all the way to the Oder-Neisse line, and then there is the rest. And the psychology, attitudes, and the worldview are very frequently very different there, and it will take time to evolve. Of course, thank God that we here in Lithuania no longer have these jokes about, if you see a German tank, you should be on the repairs platform. Yeah, it's better. And I do believe that the Bundeswehr brigade will be a very effective force that will not call the Bundeskanzleramt to ask whether we can fire on the Russians. But it will take a very, very big leap in terms of psychology for quite a few of our partners in Western Europe to come to terms with this new world. And since we're talking about democracies under pressure, and you asked about resilience and hybrid, yes, we should look at societies. And since we are discussing the role of universities, let me put it like that. In my personal view, the approach to this should be long-term, consistent, and, if I may say so, philosophical. Because all this kind of, let's do fact-checking. Look, I work in the media. No one cares about fact-checking once you've seen a TikTok video of, Russians distributing bread in Mariupol rather than bullets. People, and also deception. Look, in 1939, in August 1939, 31st of August, when the German Reich brought the SS, brought bodies of prisoners and dressed them up in Polish uniforms, and then invited photographers to show that this was a Polish attack on the German radio station. It's not that different in terms of attitude than what we see today on social media, for example. It's just the technology that is different, more immediate, and probably more penetrating. So I think that apart from what we call counter-propaganda, fact-checking, whatever proactive measures in the information space, one should think about societies. And I think one of the things where the universities can play a role is actually enhancing the role of humanities for all students. Not only for those who do sociology or political science or whatever. Maybe to some extent, I want to be paradoxical here, maybe physicists need philosophy and history more than philosophers and historians in the audience. Because what we see among especially kind of younger generation, not a very good grasp of history. And it's not only because of age. It is because of courses that are being increasingly fragmented and tailored to political agendas or basically to what the sponsors want to pay for. Secondly, I do think that all these, the idea of having, let's say, the 100 great books course or general course on philosophy is important. It's not immediate, but people who are taught that, people who absorb this, they can do exactly what Vygaudas said. They can zoom out and see the bigger picture. So I think that society needs to be maybe turned again towards the idea of truth, debate, and the struggle of ideas as something valuable. And this will help to bring up generations of people, new generations of people, that will be more resilient to the clutter, media clutter, that today is produced not only by the media organizations like mine, but by whoever can get enough attention on YouTube or on TikTok. So in this respect, I think universities should do deeper and wider what they used to do before. And this will contribute to the resilience. So I'll stop here, and if you have further questions, please.
Thanks a lot. It's actually, I'm very happy that Anne is on the floor and on the panel now, because Konstantin touched upon the role of the university as he was speaking in his first comments, and specifically the concept of trust, the willingness, but also the curricula. So basically what's inside the curricula, how physicists, and quoting Konstantin for a moment, should know more about ideology and philosophy, even more than the philosophical or social sciences representatives. So what is it currently that we have on stage in terms of universities, and how they can become the robust providers of the resilience?
Well, thank you so much, Victoria, for that question. And I couldn't agree more with the previous speaker, and of course, yeah, I'd really like to add a bit of a university perspective. I couldn't agree more with my previous speaker about the role of humanities as well, about philosophy. And I'd really like to add a bit of a university perspective and European University Alliance perspective also to the discussion. So European University Alliances have existed now for 5 or 6 years. We are 8 years after Emmanuel Macron's inspiring speech at the Sorbonne. it's Sven showed us a timeline. But this is a lot has been achieved by the about 70 alliances in this short time. But it's really just like the blink of an eye in the long history of universities, which is almost 1,000 years old. So, from our beginnings 1,000 years ago until now, universities have always shared a core mission, and that's to understand the world, to generate and transmit knowledge, and to educate the new generations. And this core mission is exactly what makes universities so valuable for democracies and so potentially dangerous to autocracies and dictatorial regimes. We've alluded to that as well with the new sheriff in town. So democracies need informed citizens, people who have learned to ask questions, who can define problems, who can develop and sustain an argument, who can distinguish between misinformation and information, between fake news and real news. And that's why for democracies it's so important to have a well-functioning education system at all levels, primary, secondary and higher education. So European universities fulfill this mission, but we're talking about democracies under fire and universities also under pressure, and there are some elements that already put us under pressure that might not be so visible from outside. And I'd like to speak a bit from the ground, from the university perspective about that. So first issue is stagnating funding for many public institutions. Maybe not a problem here in Lithuania when I see how beautiful your universities are. I'm talking more about Western Europe, and for me that includes the UK, who has their place in the European family, of course. So we know that defense funding will have the priority and has to have the priority in the coming years and decades. This may add to budgetary strains for many universities, not all. And our governments just need to recognize when the tipping point is reached, when you can't reduce costs any further without compromising the quality of teaching and research. So there are other constraints. I'm thinking of something that one of my teachers at Cambridge a long time ago called audit culture. Audit culture means the invasive nature of accountability in all domains. Accountability is of course very necessary. It's just that since the 1990s, we've added so much new tasks, sometimes excessive red tape to the tasks of university teachers and researchers. Instead of just trusting them, we talked about trust as well in the past, just trust them to get on with their work. That leaves less time for our core missions, teaching and research. There's also project culture. So research teams are now competing for short-term project funding. That's normal. Universities are competing for short-term institutional funding in the European University Initiative, for example. Again, that's useful, that's necessary. But combined, these developments really foster short-term thinking and constant time pressure for people who should be able to take time to reflect and to take care of the students. Can I add
Sure.
just one last point? Artificial intelligence. I've been so excited to see that that's the challenge that Sofia University takes on in their presidency. But now you've got in universities people that are pressured for time and resources, and this new technology comes along. And it's a shortcut. Actually, you can have large language models that do the homework in the student's place, assess the student's work in the teacher's place, and write research papers in the researcher's place, in the worst case. It's technologically possible. It's exciting, it's an incredibly powerful tool, but we need to find a responsible way to use AI. So for me, that's also part of being under fire. Of course, it's an opportunity, but as was said in the video, it's full of risks for any universities. It's a technology that has been unleashed without much ethical thinking, without impact assessment, without much regulation, and just we need to defend our interests as creative and thinking humans, as responsible citizens. That's also a new pressure that democracy is under, actually. Do I still have a bit of time? Yes, I see. Yeah? So how do European university alliances come into this picture? Actually, we are always stronger together, of course. An alliance has a stronger voice than a single university. We can exchange best practices, we can learn from each other. We have collective intelligence that should be superior to individual intelligence. We can show solidarity, as happens with the Ukrainian universities. So to finish, education in Europe is a national, it's a regional, sometimes even, thinking about Germany, regional competence. So the European Union can actually only try to gently nudge us in a certain direction, as it does with the European Universities Initiative, which we all welcome. So we always have to tick many boxes when we write our proposals. And among other things, we have to prove that we are at the service of society. Many think then about employability, you know, training perfectly skilled workers for the industry, including the defense industry. Of course, that's important. But just educating people who are curious, who ask questions, who don't just spit out AI-generated content, who can ask questions that go against the grain as well. Doing our core mission, that's also a service to society, I would hope, and important for the foundations of our democracy.
Thank you so much, Anne. I would love to give a second round. Yeah, very much needed. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for your first contributions, and I'll come to Vygaudas, back to your zooming out. I would call it zoom in also concept, you know, how from zooming out we can zoom in. Because what the topic of our discussion today, but the global topic, and I'm very thankful for this university to have this resilience concept as taken as a core for that. I was working with the Ukrainian government back in 2021. We were designing the concept of resilience on all of the levels. And what we came into conclusion is something that the new concept that I was, while emailing to you, I was proposing, and it's something that Ukrainian scholars are advancing, so-called defense as a service. Because when you say to University of Cambridge, we are talking about defense funding or anything, there will be fire alarms. There is still this mindset shift that we need to do, as absolutely agree that you, Konstantin, were pointing out. So, Vygaudas, zooming in, defense as a service, building the bridges between the academia, private business, I believe it's very important. Government, mayors, or let's say regional perspectives, and universities. What else is missing, or should we add into in order to zoom in efficiently?
Well, that's a very good question. You know, on the way here, I drove and I was thinking about Ukraine, I was thinking about the conference Resilience, and I just caught my mind how historians will write about this chapter of history. I mean, I think people don't even appreciate that soon we're going to reach the same time frame how long at that time Soviet Union and Russia was fighting Nazi Germany. Almost 4 years. And thanks to the Allies, they succeeded to win Nazi Germany. Now Russia is fighting for the 4th year and can literally advance only so little. Which brings to zoom in a conclusion from my point of view. First, you can only succeed in deterring your enemy or adversary if you have a strong civil society, which Ukraine has demonstrated throughout the last 3 years, even longer, since Crimea 2014. And that's something we have to learn from you, all of us, to deep dive and, I mean, understand, comprehend, and draw conclusions. How Ukrainians manage to gather behind national concept and national identity, and the goal to withstand much larger country in terms of defense of its sovereignty. So we have to learn from you. That's first. Secondly, I think when we zoom in, we speak about the role of universities, which is of critical importance. I mean, liberal arts of universities like WMU, but it's also about, creating the conditions for a free flow of ideas, but retaining the sense of competitive views, while at the same time, gathering behind that larger concept of who you are as a country, as a nation, and as a state. Third one, and I really appreciate what Anne was Anya. Both are fine. French German. Oh, that's becoming complicated. How to pronounce? But I mean, I really see what you say, and you're absolutely right that that the higher education and research and development is going to be under severe constraints because of resources necessary for the survival and for defense of European continent. But at the same time, I think there are resources where we can move forward. And I would view it from my own personal experience. European Union is great, but sometimes we have to have less European Union to have more European Union. I mean, it sounds controversial, but now being in business and working in a field which you mentioned of artificial intelligence and helping very much American companies to expand in Europe and in the Middle East, from healthcare to national defense and intelligence, I see, we joke with American friends. Americans are innovating, Europeans are regulating. And look what happened with AI regulation. No one is going to invest in Europe in AI. You will not have AI startups which would promote a new, cutting edge technologies, because, it's impossible to do business. So one thing which I see a huge resource for, other sectors like healthcare and education, if Commission would go back, what I remember President Juncker would say, we have to cut directives of EU from 300 average per year to 30. He tried, he didn't reach. I think he reached down to 70. I think we're back to 370 or so. But sometimes, sometimes less regulation, less proactiveness in European Parliament or Commission might be better for business and better for a society as such, because going back to zooming out from zooming in and trying to match both of them, what is happening now on the world scale? There is a huge competition on who's going to control AI tools and who's going to build big data. And surprise, surprise, it's not European Union. China is trying to do so. United States is doing that, but also Middle East. Look, now Dubai has become a world hub of big data in the healthcare, in new technologies, R&D, and soon in defense as well. So here Europe has to zoom out before going zoom in and try to make as cost-effective governance of European Union as possible, of which, both societies would benefit, but also necessary sectors such as healthcare, research and development, and higher education would win.
Thank you so much, Vygaudas. Actually, three things that, if I may, and I'll pass the floor to Konstantin. Learning from us, we are very happy, actually, to do whatever we want on the lessons learned that we are sharing all of the times. And I believe this type of partnerships, like here we are in Lithuania, but not only, it really, really matters. On the second point, you're absolutely right about China and Middle East. And thank you for bringing this concept into the idea, because the bottlenecks in the EU, Brussels, what you have in the defense, for example, the sector that I am working mostly with, they are nightmares for the small, medium enterprises of European companies to enter. That it's absolutely impossible. Therefore, it produces a long-lasting waiting timing. Sorry for my blah, blah, blah thing, because it's a long question and not efficient. When you have adversaries who are fast and robust in delivering and actually expanding the things that they are basically attacking, not only European Union, but specifically because we are in one of the European Union countries. Konstantin, that's why I would love to draw attention to you, if possible, on the reflections. We're talking about the battlefield that is happening, not because of the AI, but in everything, for the hearts and minds, specifically on what is in the mindsets of our young people, also us, sorry, we are also young, and at the same time, the trust and will to do something together. And in this case, I really want to continue, because maybe if you can put it into the bullet points, how from the reactive mood or testing pilot case we can come to be more proactive. You started to do that in a long-term perspective. But sometimes the solutions should be now, especially when the political cycles are marching. And this country in particular, next year for all of the EU countries for the European parliamentary elections, so will be under the fire and constant attacks of undermining the processes, especially in the democratic cycles. We're going to have processes in the United States for the Congress level, so we will see also the shift on that. Again, at the core of fighting for our mindsets, how to stay and what can we do in the proactive measures, not on the reactive modes?
Well, it's a great question to which, Victoria, I do not have an immediate answer. Because,
just your perspective.
We don't have too much time to slip into this kind of debate about whether we have a crisis of democracy or we do not have the crisis of democracy. I think that maybe just a few observations, if you wish. Someone, I think you, Vygaudas, you mentioned the necessity to trust civil society, right? Okay. Now, you trust civil society, for example, in Ireland. Is anyone here who follows the Irish presidential election? Probably not. You do. Okay. Now, in about 3 days' time, Ireland is probably going to elect someone who would do honor to RT and TAS as president of the country. With all the boxes ticked, anti-NATO, anti-America, anti-EU, pro-Putin, pro-Assad, whatever. So the civic society is going to have a say, and I think one of the reasons why it happens is because people feel that traditional parties, traditional politicians no longer represent their views, and they want mavericks. And that's why you have this, what basically is called by this sort of all-encompassing term of populist, which says everything and nothing immediately. Populist is someone who wins elections that we don't. That's the thing. And I suppose that here you need to really listen to people and find out why they turn away from the traditional parties, from traditional narratives, maybe because they feel that political structures are not addressing what they feel is important. And maybe face it and start talking about what people are worried about. And be upfront. Don't be afraid to be confrontational with people, because when you say something that you are convinced of something and you say it, people listen. They may not agree with you immediately, but they will respect you, and that's an important thing. So I think in this respect, democracy is a very important element of the societal resilience, because if people do not believe that democracy works for them, they will turn to all sorts of shady actors. And by the way, this lady, Catherine Connolly in Ireland, she's supported by thousands of Russian bots on social media. So I don't know whether she is the Kremlin agent, probably not. I wouldn't hire her as an agent. But it seems like...
Don't propose such solutions, sorry.
When the Chinese or the Russians see an opening, they go for it. Yeah. And I think that this is a number one thing. Second thing, which actually worries me, I'm just a media person, I'm a journalist, I'm not a philosopher, but what worries me is that to some extent, the consumer society, which we all wanted to live in a sense, leads to commodification of a lot of things, especially in the, well, if you wish, I wouldn't say spiritual, but in the realm of ideas. And this leads to cynicism. And to this idea, oh, it doesn't matter, you know, you have a PR agency today, it works for Social Democrats, tomorrow it works for the Conservatives, who cares? I mean, it's all rubbish. I'd rather watch, you know, Russian stuff on TikTok. So I think that I don't have an answer to that. And by the way, I think one of the reasons that Putin is continuing his war and may continue it for quite a long time is because the current Russian society, at least in the big cities, in Moscow, Yekaterinburg, St. Petersburg, so on and so forth, is a society that is thoroughly commodified, which is a consumer society. It has something to lose, and because of that, it isolates itself from reality, because it knows it's dangerous to plug into reality. You'll have to answer questions to yourself which you do not want to answer. So this silent majority in Russia is actually Putin's biggest asset, not the crazy patriots. It's people who are indifferent. So to me, this is a challenge which is not for Konstantin Eggert to solve, but I do see that this is an issue. And number three, I think that the kind of, that's what Vygaudas talked about, the physical manifestation of defense, of confronting a very real evil, a very real aggression, as the Ukrainians do now, as probably, eventually, one or several NATO member states will have to do, is very important. And because of that, I think not only spending on defense is important, but also explain to the people, that brings me to probably my point number one, explaining to the people why it is proper, good, why it is honorable. And this will take quite a long time, because in Germany, for example, pacifism is now a national ideology. And when Chancellor Merz wanted to introduce, or he still wants to introduce, how we call it, the collab, the obligatory military service, the biggest pushback is actually from the young people. And you'll have to serve, well, 9 months, like in Lithuania, or a year. I've spent quite a bit of time recently with young Germans, and for them, being in the defense forces is something below them. This is a problem, at least in some West societies. So I think not being afraid of manifestly saying that defending our country, our values, is important without thinking about the political consequences and the ratings is also, I think, a very immediate and urgent contribution, and we can only ask Ukrainians to help with that.
Thank you so much, Konstantin. Just for balancing the concept, also working with the young Germans, absolutely completely different bubble I'm working in. Those who are already conscripted, thinking about the reserves and everything. So I think the discussion is very much varied. Where are you? Which regions are you following to? But absolutely correctly, Konstantin, that's why I will refer to N, now is about algorithming. So basically, the manifestations of the ideas, especially of the electoral phase, is that the algorithm are doing just right now. So algorithm, not the future, but the present. This is something that's happening, and basically the algorithms are basically substituting some of the choices that Konstantin said, commodity, absolutely brilliant word, commodity, because it's comfort. I'm mostly working with Italian Republic, I'm Italian speaker, and basically like Mediterranean region is something of my professional domain, and I just come from Rome where it's plus 25, so Kaunas, sorry, I'm freezing. But at the same time, the discussion about pacifism is something, there's a long historical debate since the Second World War is still present in their mindset. So again, on the mindsets, we are thinking that our adversaries are instrumentalizing the modern technologies or algorithm, the technology in such a way they are shifting what university businesses, civil society, or governmental actors should do. And therefore, there is sometimes the discrepancy line, what university can deliver, and then what in reality is needed. What's your takeaway, taking into account that we should zoom into also thinking not only 2035, but even longer. But let's take that milestone as something, what we would like to do, or would you propose within the universities? Taking into account that the resilience is the key for a moment, but then just zooming, sorry, maybe not zooming, but just thinking or reflecting about the future as well.
Yeah, thank you. Does this work? No.
Give mine, take mine.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, so I'll zoom out a little bit just to share this. Okay, you're the professional. Horizontal, like that? Is that better? Yeah, sorry, I hope, yeah. Okay, I didn't know. Okay, I'm not the media professional.
My life around mics.
Yeah, I know. Well, okay, I'll learn from you. Right, now I've lost my thread. So no, zooming out, sorry, a little bit. So talking from the French perspective, the French, well, it's a very centralized state, as you know, and that has also its advantages, many disadvantages, some advantages. All the universities are very close to the Ministry of National Education, as it's called now. And the government, the ministry really has a lookout for foreign influence in universities. So there are reports about this. There's when we suspect something, well, mostly China, I must say. There are people, diplomats that we can talk to actually in each region and so on. So that was zooming out. Zooming in. I'm actually thinking, so in the video from the very beautiful video prepared by Sofia University, we heard about digital literacy. I think we also need, that's super important, we also need, and it's related, media literacy. And I'm really struck by it, and it's completely natural, how when you're in the Baltic states, you always have somehow Russia in your mind. It's impossible to forget here that Russia exists and what it's, of course, with Ukraine even more. It's a bit different in the West. It's something we can learn from the Baltic states and the Nordic states. But in Western Europe, what I see, lots of people have the United States in their mind. So it's we're sort of focused on like the latest. There's also entertainment value, I must say, but the latest news about Trump and what he's been doing again. So what's missing is sort of the middle. So Konstantin just asked who knows about elections in Ireland. So I didn't know. Who knows what's happening with universities in Serbia right now, for example. So actually this helping our students also to focus on our own continent and on our neighbor countries. We have so much to learn from each other. I think that's important too. I'll call that media literacy. Maybe it's another, we need to find another term.
Thank you so much. I actually just found a really nice quote which I was looking for as a historian. The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge. And that's, I think, something that we should take into consideration specifically as an outcome of our 2 rounds of the. I'm raising now, if possible, the floor to the audience because we have 25 minutes and it's just a perfect occasion to engage the audience as well. Just please prepare your questions because I think it's important what you heard and specifically what we heard. And I would absolutely contribute if there are young professionals who would basically, or junior professionals who would love to ask the question. Because what we are missing here is not only for Mykola Trofymenko, but I believe the younger generations, what they are thinking about the democracies under fire and basically what do they take into consideration as the next step. So if we have mics in the room, yeah, fantastic. I would, if possible, there is actually 2 hands already or in the back. If possible, please present yourself or where are you from, what you do, but your question and to whom you're addressing, if not to the whole panel. Thank you.
So thank you so much, first of all, for the interesting panel. I am Tadas Pintveris, a local student here. I'm not part of this alliance, unfortunately, but it has been really interesting hearing the discussions and what all the academic staff has been up to. So first of all, thank you so much for the interesting panel and the discussion. I have a question for the French representative. I think the professor raised some truly relevant points about the growing role of AI in our higher education institutions, especially how now these technologies are basically capable of completing much of the homework and research tasks the students face in our universities, right? As Madam mentioned. And as an alliance of universities, I'm curious, how do you see the role of universities evolving in this new context? Do you think there will be a need to fundamentally perhaps rethink how higher education institutions teach, assess, and upload academic integrity, and just know the role of the universities themselves, especially given the broader democratic pressures, linking to democracies being under pressure and how, when how education, populists is, one of the main tools we have for democracies under pressure.
So actually two questions.
Yeah,
First, what's the role of the universities in tackling the AI, and what's the future, as far as I understand? Thank you. Anna, please.
Yeah, maybe I can even combine both in my answer. I don't have the magic secret either. And it's telling that Transform for Europe is going to dedicate an entire year to thinking about this, and I think a year is at least necessary. The thing is, it's already here. It's already here, it's already being used, sometimes as a sort of dirty secret, sometimes more openly. Yesterday in Vilnius we discussed about how to acknowledge, actually, in our research papers, the help of, so it's not just student level, it's also teacher and researcher level. It can be an aid, well, it can also be close to plagiarism and dishonesty, of course. I think, well, that's my intuition, or what I try to do with my students as well, is to go actually perhaps back to the future in a way. Somebody here talked about the Socratic method that you like at Kaunas University. I think we've got to go back to less written exams and more oral communication, more debate, and where you can't take your, I had notes, you've got your phone and so on, but actually trying to really listen to each other and respond to each other, and perhaps also for teachers, not so much assess the result, but the process. How do you get to writing this paper, if we still have to write papers in the future? But back to the future, because universities have not always been so paper-focused. So there has been more face-to-face teaching and discussion and debate in the past, and I think that's probably also the future. That's the only way I see now. And there are, of course, very smart ways of integrating AI responsibly, as to personalize teaching content and so on. But actually, we've started to use it before thinking about it, and that's why it's so useful that Sophia takes the lead on that.
Thank you.
Can I just jump on that?
Sure,
I think it's a brilliant question. I mean, I don't have a solution, and that's why probably initiative of yours, of universities, will come to that. But my humble advice would be to invite you to view to the AI as a tool to achieve the goal, which will not replace your educational process, but which may facilitate and will help to grow you. That's the first one. The second one, now being in business and having worked in international corporation on the corporate board and participating in hundreds of interviews for very well-paid big jobs, I would view exam at university as something as an interview for the job. You write your own motivation letter. you write your own, presentation, like we selected new rector of university a while ago, but then you go to the interview. And that's where, I think professors will have to afford more time, to go through the conversation and dialogue and understanding, not only the knowledge of the subject, but also of the topic, but also of your own values, of your own vision, and of your own, capacity to use the tools available, including the AI. And I here agree. I think that's a fascinating, subject. But I think something what universities will have to transform themselves from less written exams and probably more of a conversation, which would help. You will not be able to trick away and play around if you have a live conversation and look to professor eye to eye. I think that's probably will be one of the future for universities.
Thank you so much. We have one more question over here, just in the area. No? Sorry, I missed that. Yeah, please. Thank you.
I'm Tulia Catalan, University of Trieste. I am an historian. And first of all, I would like to thank you for this really interesting session. And I would like just to ask you something, just using my professional tools in order to go deeper a big question. What are you presenting now is a new vision of European Union. But I would like, because we are now in an academic context, I would like to go back to the origins of European Union, thinking what happened after World War II that destroyed this part of the world and destroyed our states. And when we went out from the war, the concept, the basic concept of European Union and the men and women that built it were to go on in peace, trying through democracy, through scientific diplomacy, that I would like to highlight this, to go on trying to face against dangers and against undemocratic behavior. Then, just speaking as an Italian, we can say that in our Constitution, Article number 11, we have a very strong statement that we have to face with it. Just listen to you today in the morning, and our article said that Italy rejects war. So, what we have to do...
What's your question?
My question is, why you don't speak anymore about peace strategies, diplomacy of science? Today I have listened only about military strategies, defense strategies, education to war, and so on.
We got the question.
I perfectly understand.
Thank you.
But I would like also to listen to something other.
Thank you so much for your question. And we have already a response. Konstantin. Italian community.
Well, since I preached confrontation, thanks for your applause. It actually revs me up a little bit. Madam, peace is a very good concept. No one is ever against peace. But the problem is that it's a very deceptive concept. And it depends on the context. So, when today, by the way, exactly, I'm sorry I mentioned Ireland so much, but the lady who's probably going to be the president of Ireland, and actually the current person there too, they all speak about peace all the time. Somehow it always means that, you have to give land to Putin and we will all live in wonderful peace. I think that peace can only come with justice, truth, and basically respect for especially the victims, those who are on the receiving side of aggression. And in this respect, we can remember that, for example, the Helsinki Accords in 1975, yes, they achieved certain peace and stability in Europe, no, not for a long time, but still. But that was because there was a truly sincere desire among all the leaders of all the countries that took part in the Helsinki Accords to achieve, well, essentially a compromise, which would be honorable and which will give something to each side. So no one is against peace, but I think today it depends on where you are in Europe, or by the way, in Asia. If you're in Taiwan, you can achieve peace by surrendering to the Chinese, but probably it's not such a great idea. So I'd say that we should be very, very careful with the concept of peace and look at each case specifically and not generalize about it. Thank you very much.
Okay, Vygaudas?
Well, it's a very valuable question, and I appreciate that. You know, we must be proud how much Europe has achieved thanks to European integration. And that's from the Rome Treaty up till nowadays. You know, the integration between Germany and France was meant to avoid the war on European soil. That's what economic, political integration helped to achieve. The peace dividend also played a big role because it was not only European Union, it was also America and NATO. And NATO's, you know, raison d'être has been, I mean, Germans down, Russians out, Americans in. Thirdly, I've been myself on the front lines of scientific and educational diplomacy in Moscow as European Union ambassador in 2013 and 2017, and of course you may remember that. And even after Crimea, illegal occupation of Crimea and the war in Donbass, I was still advocating to maintain the bridges with the academic society of Russia. I mean, some may remember that. And we managed to even increase the budget from 15 to 35 million euros for student exchange. Russia was most active participant of Horizon project, etc. But with all due respect, it went to vain. This did not help. This did not deter Putin to launch a conventional war against independent, sovereign, neighboring country, Ukraine, continuing subjugating, with aim to subjugating the country, but also conducting hybrid attacks in continental Europe and UK and in our countries. So that brings, and I hope you will share that opinion, that while achieving the peace on the continent among EU member states, we are still facing the threat from outside of the European Union, a different threat. And if Trump's actions and Putin's, aggressive actions did not help us to understand that we have to go beyond and become not only economic, political, but also defensive unity, then we have a deep problem. If we don't move into the defense union of European Union, and maybe not all the countries will get in, maybe Italy will want to abstain from that. And that's where I think the coalition of the willing, or what Emmanuel Macron, before he used to speak about multi-speed Europe, I believe that's going to be the future of that, and each country will. But I think without defense union, we will continue to watch how Trump and Putin defines the future of Europe and Ukraine, which is a shame for European Union, which is a shame for every European. We have to be at the table, and we have to shape the future for the sake of our security and economic well-being.
Okay, thank you so much, Vygaudas. I'll pass the floor to Anne, please.
Okay, just a short reaction, because actually you're putting your finger on something that has also been trotting around in my head, and I'll have perhaps a sort of middling position. I'll try. Of course, the word peace, Konstantin alluded to that, has been weaponized. And that's nothing new. It's happened in the peace movement in the 1980s, being for peace. Of course, everybody's for peace. But, well, it was also always a bit being for the Soviet Union, being for... It's nothing new. For me, it's nothing new that the word peace is being weaponized by some people. But as academics, we need to be watchful. We need to really analyze the words that we use, as journalists as well, of course. And I hope, I'm listening to everybody, and I hope that the word pacifism is not on its way to become a sort of insult, because there's actually something very valuable in that. The European Union got the Nobel Prize for Peace some years ago, as you know, and very well deserved. So that's also in our tradition. And actually, when I was listening to the Vice Minister of Defense of Lithuania this morning, who said that the kindergarten children are now playing with drones, and as a good practice, I thought, well, I hope they also paint flowers and somebody reads books to them, and maybe they invent stories themselves. So I think, middling position. In the educational sector, I think we need to prepare for war. That's something we can learn from Ukraine and the Baltic states and the Nordic states, who are more exposed and more aware of the risk. But we also need to prepare for peace. And I think that's a transition also to, not yet, but we have another panel about mental health. As somebody who's grown up in the Cold War, I think we need to, and we already have this enormous mental health epidemic among young people. We already have anxiety about the future of the planet. Now, anxiety about war is coming back in the middle of Europe, so we really need to watch out there and sort of balance perhaps a bit the war and the peace discourse. But both are important.
All right, I'm mindful that we have around 5 minutes left, and therefore, if possible, I would like to take our perspective for how we're going to do till 2035. What are the 3 things, a takeaway, that each of you would address this audience, but also taking into mindset the younger audience, to whom 2035 will be a senior age to some extent, which we're understanding that we will need to protect not only our walls, but our hearts, first of all, in order to build trust, stay resilient, but at the same time united. Konstantin, maybe I'll start with you. Sorry, go on.
It always boils down to the famous 3 points. Well, maybe to come back to the previous question, there's one observation that I would like to make, and which is probably also a lesson, a potential lesson to us all. To paraphrase the now nearly forgotten figure of interwar European politics, Joseph Beck, he said one interesting thing in 1939. He said, peace, as all things in life, has a price, high but quantifiable. Well, I think that till 2035, we should consider that this continent should never accede, should never agree to a concept of peace at any price. That is the condition for survival, because peace at any price always means surrender to the forces of evil, to the convenience, to something that will lead you to a bigger disaster. That's number one. Number two, practically speaking, I think the universities and the media, if the media survives, by the way, we don't know now that anyone can broadcast him or herself, they will have to be part of this rethinking of, to some extent, European identity, and maybe also saving democracy from the crisis. I'm sure that it will persevere, it will survive. But we need to think about it. We need to think about inspiring people, because inspiration is the best remedy against cynicism and complacency. And in this respect, both, as I said, universities with expanded programs, especially, as I said, in humanities, should play a role in media. Well, I mean, if we survive, we should find a way of reaching out to people and in new ways. How? I don't know, maybe I won't ever live to see it. And number three, I think that, and this is part of the democratic process, we should put more trust in people and not so much in bureaucracies. It's difficult, sometimes it's hazardous, as we see in Ireland today. Or maybe we'll see in Germany next year with the elections coming. Next year, in 3 years when the elections are there. But I think people respond to trust. And in this respect, it's for the political class, the chattering classes, the intellectuals, the intelligentsia, whatever you call it, to actually rekindle this trust towards the people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm passing the floor to Vygaudas, please.
Try to be very brief, watching the clock running. What I wish to see in 2035, and I hope we're going to arrive to that, on a European level, more cohesion, but also flexibility. Because our debate just between us already demonstrates that, I mean, you cannot apply the same rules to all 28, 27 or 30 countries in the future. So European political leaders will have to accommodate the strengths of our diversity and our cohesion at the same time. Secondly, I trust Ukraine will become member of EU far before 2035 and will bring the most resilient, strong society and probably strongest army on European continent. And thirdly, Europe will be an independent political actor, which will certainly work together hand in hand with Americans when the national interests coincide, but will be able to act not only economically, politically, and otherwise, but also militarily when those interests don't coincide.
Thank you so much, Vygaudas. Anne, passing back to you.
All right, I'll be saved by the time because saved by the gong. For maybe I only have two things and not three, two takeaways. I think we need universities to be strong and resilient, and that's a common task for our democracies. That also means financial resilience. There's an EUA, European University Association report about that. It's something we should not forget. Financial resilience. I know here in Lithuania it's maybe not such an urgent problem as it is in other countries where universities might even go bankrupt and disappear, which is the case in some countries. So that's one thing. Universities are, as a public service, a vital public service, the entire education sector needs respect. Then universities are also a place for debate. And I'm personally rather happy that we are not in the phase where people were disinvited from campuses has probably finished. So, and that's, in my eyes, a good thing. But there are limits, of course, if there's some Holocaust denier or something like that, of course, you wouldn't invite them on your campus, but universities need to be places for debate, and so we train our future professionals, our future colleagues who are already citizens also for debate. And it's exactly what we are doing here is really the best example of how Europe and how universities should be.
Thank you so much, Han. Applauses to this panel. I really appreciate, first of all of you who were reflecting and listening, but also standing up and making the questions, because that's the place where we should do that. I'm also very thankful to all of the rectors who are sitting just in front of me, because we are talking about the future of the universities as it is now. It's not the future, it's reality that we should take. But also, as a Ukrainian, I'm very honored to be here, speaking to all of you. Last but not least, of course, thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you so much for my distinguished panelists. And I'm inviting everyone for lunch, as far as I understand.
1 second.
One
we
second.
have to thank an excellent moderator. Amazing.
Thank you. Passing the floor to Vilma, as far as I understand.